Okay, well, for time's sake, we'll just get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Face to Face. My name is Sarai. I am Parent University Coordinator of Network 4, and welcome to today's session, ISAC Preparing for College. So some quick things to know before we get started. This session, like all of our other sessions, will be recorded. We want to make sure that the parents who were unable to join us get this information later on our YouTube channel. That link will be found on screen as well as in the chat. We will have a presentation followed by a conversation with Olivia and Claudia. The chat will be open throughout the meeting to allow participants to type out any questions or comments, but please keep in mind that we may not have time to go through all questions throughout this time. To sign up for our newsletter, please make sure to click that link that will be provided in the chat as well as on screen. Please join us for our next sessions. Tomorrow we have a CPS, the Library Connection, from 10 to 11:30 in Spanish. We also have Ask the Expert with ODLSS. Friday, we have Come Inteligente, Muévete Más, and Eat Smart, Move More, which is the same session that we provided in English and Spanish. Monday, we have SEL, so social emotional impact of the pandemic on the youth. And then Wednesday, we have access and enrollment with GoCPS. Once again, everyone, welcome to Face to Face. My name is Sarai, Parent University Coordinator of Network 4. Today, we'll be presenting ISAC Preparing for College. And we have Olivia with us. Olivia, if you'd like to take a moment to introduce yourself. And we also have Claudia with us, which they're part of the same team with ISAC.
You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I could hear you. Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
You're fine.
So I am a parent outreach coordinator with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, also known as ISAC. I have been with ISAC since December of 2019, and along with Claudia, do the presentations and facilitate some of the information sessions for parents as we start to prepare to get our kids onto college in this transition period to be young adults, and not just to get into college, but also to complete their academic goals. I was born in Mexico, in Jalisco, and raised here in the United States from the age of 5. So I have participated in the education system since early on. I'm the first in my family to graduate from the university, but also the first one in my nuclear family to complete both elementary and high school education. I have 2 kids. I live on the south side of Chicago, and I have a dog that I adopted from a shelter. Claudia, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Claudia Ali, and I also work with Olivia as a parent outreach coordinator at the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. We both started the same day, and our background, it's a little similar. I came here when I was 18 years old, and it took me a while to get into college. I have to get my GED first, learn English, and then, of course, taking little classes at a time, a couple classes, 1 or 2 per semester. But then after a couple of years, I finished my undergrad, and like I said, it's my story is similar to Olivia's. My parents didn't graduate from elementary school. I'm the first one in my family who went to college and graduated from college, and we're here just to help you guys understand and get to know a little bit of the resources that our agency has for you parents to support your children in their higher education. Thank you.
So this is the second session of a 4-part session. We're doing these monthly. We started with applying for college because the application process started just over 2 weeks ago on October 1st. And so whether your child is planning on going into post-secondary education, completing college or 4-year university, we highly encourage you to and your child to sit down and complete that application so that at a later date you can decide if that's something that you want to finalize. Only because there is a pot of money that is available once the funds exhaust. There is nothing else for students to have access to. And so if they are contemplating going to college, having that application completed would help so that they can at least have some stake and be able to receive some of the funds allocated during this school year. So the information that we share is based on us experiencing being first generation college students and our experience with our children. I have a student, a daughter who is still in her last year of the university, and I, can relate to some of the parents and some of the things that are costs that may not be calculated in the cost of attending university and things that as a parent we might want to consider. The next slide, please. So as I said, I work for the Illinois Students Assistance Commission, and I work for ISAC, and this is the state agency that basically is where students have access to receiving funds through the states, because we administer some of the scholarships and grants that are or programs that are offered to Illinois residents. Our mission is to provide Illinois students with information and assistance to help make education beyond high school accessible and affordable. And so that's where Claudia and I come in to help the parents kind of navigate and understand this aspect for their students. Next slide, please. So the agenda for today is discussing, the difference between a college, a two-year college, and a four-year university, what the resource fairs are that are being held for them. Some are back to in-person, some are virtual. So that you are familiar with, the college life and have that understanding, the GPA, the ACT and SAT that your student has to take, and their grade point average, and how that factors into getting into colleges or universities and assessing that. The website and other resources that are available at your fingertips online, where you don't need to leave the house to be able to access some of that basic information. Again, the difference between colleges and universities, the application process, deadlines, as I mentioned, the application for student aid just opened up on October 1st. And we want to make sure that you know that there's deadlines for that as well as for colleges, and each college has their own deadline. And again, college visits. The next slide, please. So just so that you all know, in the city of Chicago, there are 7 community colleges that a student can go to. They're all spread out geographically throughout the city, some on the north side, some on the west side, central part of downtown, as well as the south side of Chicago. And we highly encourage you to get familiar with some of the college fairs in the area to make sure that you have a list of some of these colleges if you can. If they're open to in-person visits, for you to make appointments to go and do those in person so that your child can see what college life feels like and looks like on campus. They could see who walks around the campus, who's taking classes at what time, what some of the classes look like. They may be able to audit or sit in a class and see the instructor give classes. And this can be a simple walkthrough, can happen through any type of vacation or time that you may have to be able to apologize for that, my son is right next to me, so that you could be able to walk through and see what these places look like and start to create a culture of education and start to create that with your child at a young age. It doesn't have to be once they're in high school, it could be much sooner. And this is again so that you could support and participate in any extracurricular activities that your child may have an interest in. One of the things that we try to say throughout the presentation, Claudia and I, is to try to work from your child's strengths. As you learn this process and see what some of the deadlines and stressors may be for your child, it may help to empathize with them and to help them get onto their academic goals, to make it easier for them and encourage them to not just enroll, but to complete their educational goals. Like I said, these are some of the community colleges that are nearby. There is a link for you to see what the cost is for the colleges and the universities through our website. So you have some idea as to where some of the places are located. They would be links so that you can have access and start seeing some of these colleges online. As I said, it makes it easier for you to get some understanding as to what colleges offer, what the universities offer, what their primary focus or education or strength is, so that you could pair that up with what your child is interested in studying. So just because a school, offers your student it may not pair up with what their academic goals or interests are. And so this is why we want you to get familiar with what the concentration is for the universities, where some of these colleges are located, so that you have an idea as to whether or not your child is going to take advantage of the dorm rooms or not, and if they're not, what that transportation or the time frame for them to get to and from school is going to be. Next slide, please.
One of the things, Olivia, if you don't mind, I would like to add on the previous slide, that is just an example of the Chicago city colleges. There are more throughout the state of Illinois. And one of the other things I want to mention or point out is that these are colleges that offer a 2-year career program, which the student can get an associate degree. Not all schools that are listed as colleges are a 2-year institution. For example, Columbia College, it's considered college, but in reality it offers a 4-year bachelor degree program.
Good point. Thank you for that. One of the other things to take into consideration is your students' GPA or grade point average, their class ranking, their scores especially if they're in their junior year, sometimes in their sophomore year, they may take some of the practice tests to see where they are academically with these test scores. This is where grades and selecting classes is very important, especially as you start to think of what it is that they're going to be studying. If your child is interested in the medical field or anything associated with science, maybe making sure that their science grades are good, that their math grades are good, that they're participating in as many extracurricular activities that are tied to science and anything that has to do with the career path in which they're taking, whether that's getting involved in volunteering at a hospital or in a nonprofit that does some kind of education around health or anything like that, are things to be able to consider for extracurricular activities or things that you could put onto an academic resume for your child as you start to plan out going to the university. And so these are things that you may want to be mindful of. So as they select the classes, there are some minimum classes that they can take to meet their graduation criteria from high school, but again, emphasizing some of these things that they could take and participate in clubs and things like that. The debate team, the science club, or the math club at school are things that can help them to advance whatever it is that they may be academically looking to get into once they start their bachelor's degree or getting into college and completing that aspect, because some of these classes may be able to count towards some of the credits that they need to complete their undergrad. And they may start them off a little more advanced than at the basic class once they enter into the university. And then a good resource to have to know what would be an adequate SAT or ACT score is the link that's there, college readiness for the SAT and ACT.org for your ACT score. I would like for you to keep in mind that some of the colleges last year did not, because of COVID, did not take the test or make that test available. So some of the students that started this year as freshmen weren't able to complete the SAT or the ACT and didn't meet that requirement. A lot of the colleges kind of forewent that because of COVID. So it's always a good idea to check in with whatever college or university your student wants to take and whether or not wants to get into, whether or not that's still a requirement for that university or college. Claudia, would you like to add anything?
I just want to kind of like just point out that All of our slides for this presentation has the same title. And as you can see, it's called Find the Right Fit, or find out what kind of college is the best match for your child's career goals. Sometimes as parents, we sometimes go for the cheaper college or university, or we go towards the college or university that offers the most financial aid. I just want to remind you guys that this is the best fit for your child, because it's what your child would be interested in, and your child is the one who's going to be experiencing either a 2-year program or a 4-year university. So you wanted to support them and making the right choice on what is it that they want to do and where is it that they want to go to.
And again, paying attention to that GPA is very important. Selecting the classes that align with what it is that your student wants to attend is very important in that process. There's a school for everyone. Again, keeping in mind your student's personality. Some colleges are very big. The campuses are very big. Some colleges are very small. The class size and the ratio teacher to student ratio is a lot smaller than some. So keeping these things in mind is very important. When my daughter went off to college, the things that I considered was distance. In case of an emergency and I needed to get to her, how quickly can I get to her? If she was across the country, it would take me at minimum a day to get there. And so those are things to consider. College safety, if you want to read through reports on suicide, you want to read reports on shootings and things like that. For my daughter, her second year of college, there was a shooting in the school, and it was right as spring break started. So I was already planning to get there, but I rushed to get to her, make sure she was locked in her dorm room, as the shooter was trying to be found by the police department. And so these are things that you want to be mindful of. You want to know worst case scenario. If it happens, how would you manage, and what access do you have to what things on campus? Some students, it may be the first time that they're away from their family, and they may need that extra support. So knowing what clubs and things are offered, or ethnic or racial groups are part of the group that, or body that are formed on campus, and where they're located, the frequency in which they meet, and how they access new recruits and things like that are things to be mindful of, so that your child feels supported during this process and not isolated and like an outsider, especially if they're going away to stay in the dormitory. So you're not physically able to see them consistently, or be there every other weekend, or however frequently, so that they have that support. The other thing, getting back to the slide, the other thing to be mindful of is some of the resources that we have on our ISAC.org website. Also in our student portal, for students can find additional resources and tools for them to budget out the cost of colleges and four-year universities, scholarships, get a list of colleges and universities within the state. That's what the Illinois post-secondary profiles is for, so that you have an idea for the size of the students that they allow freshman, sophomore, junior year, and who graduates, how many students graduate from the program, how many start, how many graduate, so that what the size of the school that your child may be interested in attending, and making sure that the program that they're interested in matches your students. My daughter, as I said, went to school. She went to Michigan, Central Michigan University, and because she was interested in an occupational therapy program, and they had one that she was interested in for her undergrad, even though she knew that that was something that she needed to get a master's degree in to complete. But all the coursework that she needed to have a foundation as an undergrad, they had at that college, and that's why, or that university, and that's why she attended there. But again, checking out our CAPEX on our student portal website for you to know what colleges, what programs, what scholarships are available, creating a profile as soon as you can, even in 8th grade, if you could start to create a profile on there, so that you could start to look at the different scholarships and look at the criteria. Some of the colleges, some of the applications for scholarships require a specific GPA. So this is where the grade point average for the classes that your high school student is taking factor into them qualifying for additional funds or scholarships as they start to think of going into a university. Claudia, do you have anything to add?
I just want to add that I just put the website, the student portal.isac.org, and that you or your student can sit down and look at the different resources that our agency has to offer. It's not only the CAPEX or the Illinois post-secondary profiles, but you can also find college to career. You can find the Illinois WorkNet. There is different resources that you guys can take a look into it and go from there for your with your goals.
Yes, there's a number of different resources in case your child is also interested in a career pathway versus a four-year institution. That's what Illinois WorkNet may be a good resource for that, because they can help with additional training where they can both work and get a certificate program to get them into a career path that they may be interested in. Budgeting and things like that, cost of attending colleges and things like that are some of the things to kind of be mindful of. And there's a lot of great resources there. There's a calculator to factor in. There's a financial aid estimator, which is kind of like running through the financial aid application so that you get an idea as to what the costs would be and what your portion would be as a parent. And so you have some idea as to what these numbers are. And so when it's time for your student to do the financial aid application once they're a senior, then you have some idea as to what those questions are asked and what information you're going to need and what dollar amount you are expected to pay and contribute towards your students' undergrad education.
One of the really good resources for students and parents is the what is called the ISAC College Q&A. So that is a platform that students and parents can find a number there where they can text us. It's not a robot who's answering those text messages. Usually for the students are the ISAC Corp members answering those text messages, and for parents it's Olivia and myself who usually take those text messages. So just feel free to use either the text messaging or the information that will be provided at the end of our presentation as well. But that's a great resource for the students and the parents.
And just for those of you that are new, the ISAC Corps members are the younger version of Claudia and I, but there's many more of them. So they're throughout the state. They're near peer mentors that are throughout the state who recently graduated from university. And their job is to work with high school students to provide information about what the financial aid application looks like and do presentations to walk them through completing that application. Some of them are first generation college students, and so they can relate to some of your students if they're the first ones in your family to go to college. And so they can provide information as to what college life is like and answer some questions in regards to that, as well as any questions that they may have regarding the application. One of the things that we said in the last presentation, because we talked about what is in the, what questions are asked in the financial aid application, this transition is for your child. The application is under your child's name. The application is the responsibility of your child, even though it requires financial information from the parent. It is the child's responsibility to complete that application in their senior year of high school so that they can get ready for their freshman year of university or college. And then it's for the next 4 years while they are in a 4-year institution, or the next 2 years if they're only doing a 2-year institution. But it is their responsibility with only the parents' financial information, but both parents and students sign the application. And so this is important for you to remember that this is something that they need your information for. But then once they complete it, they need to authorize you to be able to view the information because you don't have access to viewing it. When my daughter went off to school, I had a hard time with that because they asked for all this information about my finances, and then I didn't have access to viewing anything. I needed her authority to to be able to view these documents, it was quite interesting and quite a transition as a parent when you're used to making sure that, you know, your kids have doctor's appointments, you take them through these different things, and now all of a sudden, because they're 18, you're cut off from all of these things. So things to keep in mind. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of what the student portal looks like. You can see that on the top part in the orange, you have resources, toolbox, ISAC core members, or ISAC core. That's where, if you're interested in having your child sit with an ISAC core member, you could click on that link and it will ask you for a zip code, and you plug in your zip code and it tells you what core members are in your area. And it shows a picture of them. It gives you their phone number and email so that you can reach out to them. And there's, you know, again, a number of other resources there. If you click on it, it just kind of populates all these additional resources. With CAPEX, which is the one that we are, you know, a lot of the parents are interested in finding out how to access money once they can identify the college that suits their child to help pay for going to a post-secondary education. That's where your student can create. Again, this is still a resource for your students. They're the ones that should start the profile using their email, creating their password, creating their information, so they could be matched up to a number of different scholarships. There are some scholarships that are based on what your child wants to study. Say they're a female and they're interested in anything within the STEM field, or they have red hair, or they don't have a social security number. They could look for specific scholarships based on that criteria and be matched to that so that they can have access to, you know, putting their head in the ring and being offered or participating or competing in the scholarships that may be available to them. I mean, the bigger the scholarship or more national, the more competition there is, the smaller the scholarship or more local it is, the fewer the competition is. And these are things to kind of keep in mind. There may be associations like and I don't know if this exists, but this is just kind of putting it out there. Maybe there's an Illinois association for CPAs, you know, people that are certified public accountants, or maybe there's an association of students who are business management that are Latino or that are African American. These are things to kind of look at as you're narrowing in some of the scholarships, because those are specific to specific industries, but also to specific ethnic or racial groups. So these are things to kind of keep in mind as you start to match up and look for specific scholarships. One of the things that I would highly suggest is creating some type of template for a personal statement. A personal statement is something that is also submitted with the application for college, which is different than submitting the application for financial aid. Those are different deadlines and different things, but if you create some type of template that explains or provides, and you can help your child create something like that, about who they are and what's important to them and why they want to go to college and why the field of study that they want to do, what things they've participated or done, or, you know, achievements they've worked towards that degree or that level of interest, are some of the questions that some of these scholarship applications may ask in a personal statement. So if you have some template for all of these things, you could kind of quickly mash together something for the universities as well, or colleges, as well as for some of these scholarships, if they may ask them, because you've already kind of worked through that process. And depending on the interest of your child in studying, it can be something that can be edited based on the, you know, changing maybe the name of the scholarship, or some other kind of tailored kind of specific information for your students. And if I missed anything, Claudia, if you want to jump in.
I just want to point out that this scholarship search is in addition to the financial aid that they would receive through the FAFSA or the alternative application. So I strongly suggest, you know, to talk to your child and mention this CAPEX resource so they can start looking for scholarship as soon as possible. The sooner you start looking for resources to pay for college, the better. And again, these could be small amounts, $50 to $100 scholarship, but money is money, and it's going to help in one way or the other. So don't wait.
Thank you. Next slide. And so the difference between a 2-year college and a 4-year university. Some students, again, depending on your student, depending on your child, may want to start slowly before jumping into a 4-year institution. Some students, based on grades, may have to start at a 2-year college before going into a 4-year university. Everyone's pathway to get to that varies from person to person. It really depends on the personality of your child. There are some scholarships that are offered for Chicago Public School students that if they have good grades, then they can get into a 2-year college tuition free. If that's something that your child can take advantage of, they may want to do that route before transitioning into a 4-year institution. However, if that is the plan for your students, I would highly suggest you find out and connect with the financial aid office at that 4-year institution or the 4-year university to make sure that the coursework that your child is taking at a 2-year institution is going to be transferable and accepted by that 4-year institution, so that they don't take any additional classes that are not going to be transferable, and they don't spend additional money or scholarship funds towards something that's not going to be transferred over, and then they'll have to retake at a higher rate at a 4-year institution, because that's kind of the big price point too. A 4-year institution per credit hour charges more than a 2-year institution. A 2-year institution, they're like the city colleges that we mentioned. There's a number of different other suburban and localized community colleges throughout the state that are an alternative to a 4-year university. And so everyone kind of starts off in different pathways. Again, the goal is reaching the academic goal. So like with me, when I went to school, I went from a high school to a 4-year institution, but it didn't take me 4 years to complete it. I got derailed with other things that happened in my family life with my brother and family members and my daughter. You know, when I started, I was by myself. I was 18, 19 years old. And when I finished, I had my daughter, she was in first grade. But I finished my undergrad degree. And so it became a completely, a little longer, more, I call it more scenic route. But everyone, you know, process through things is different. Sometimes some of us have to work and go to school to help our families be supported and make sure that you know, we keep a roof over our heads. Everyone's situation is kind of different. The cost and financial aid that's available, again, it varies from school to school. So looking at the package once the financial aid comes in and seeing what it is that a student may qualify for. A 2-year institution may offer a student based on grades additional scholarships at the local level that are tied to funds that they receive from people that graduated from that 2-year institution, as well as a 4-year institution. They may have a presidential scholarship based on funds that the president of the university, you know, works to fundraise so that they have access for specific colleges or something like that. So these are things to kind of keep in mind. The other thing is, if your student lives in Chicago, but they go to Kaskaskia, which is downstate near St. Louis, they're not going to be commuting back and forth between Chicago and Kaskaskia. The schedule for a college and a 4-year university is completely different than any school schedule your child has had from elementary school to high school. They're not in school at 8 o'clock in the morning and get done by 2:30 or 3 o'clock. They may have one class for 1 hour, 8:30 to 9:30, one day a week or twice a week. They may have a science class and it may be 3 or 4 hours long because on one of those days they have a lab. So the schedule is going to be completely chopped up into smaller pieces. And so commuting and assessing how a school schedule is going to look like and the cost for getting back and forth, whether or not they should stay in the dorm or things like that, what the community looks like, what support systems does the college have to offer the school. I know that at Kaskaskia near there was cornfields. So, you know, there may not be an urban area for your child to socialize. And these are things to be mindful of. Where is the school located? What does it look like? What supports or other communities within the area? If your child goes into one of the, say, for instance, University of Chicago, that's, you know, in Hyde Park, it's very urban. There's a lot of community areas around it. They could take public transportation to downtown Chicago. They could drive, they could, or, could use a car, don't necessarily need a car because that's not available. In some other urban area, not urban, but rural areas, there may be a need for a car because the nearest next town is, 50 miles down the road. There may not be a big city nearby, or if there is, there's no public transportation to get to it. So these are all kind of things to be mindful of as you're factoring in the cost. Transportation from your child to get to your house from that college and back, or the university and back, is not factored into the scholarship or the financial aid that your student receives. So how would you pay for your child to get back and forth from school? Any additional services or any additional programs, as I said, college life, once they're on campus, is there a Latino club? Is there an African American club? Is there a chess club? Is there, a number of different clubs available? And what other interests does your child have? They may want to participate so that they feel part of a community. They feel that they're kind of learning things about themselves and aren't missing you completely, wanting to come home every weekend and having to pay for that expense of the drive back and forth and the time back and forth between their college and or university and your house. You also want to look at the enrollment size, for the school. As I mentioned earlier, suicide rates. Some students are very social, and if they're in a very rural area and there's not a lot for them to do, it's kind of like COVID right now, where everybody's kind of stuck at home and doesn't feel complete or out of place because they can't socialize as much. So someone that's very social, going to a very rural community college or four-year institution are things to be mindful of, because you want to be mindful of your child's state of mind during this process, because they may be hard for them to adjust to the college schedule on top of being by themselves for the first time and away from family, and then having this place where they can't really properly socialize. Maybe another factor that may impede them from completing or focusing on their studies because they feel out of place. So making sure that you have all of these factors and are mindful of all of these things, I think is very important as a parent. Claudia, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, you cover a lot. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So again, as you're finding the match for what college, what your student is interested in, as they're applying for them, as we said, October 1st, financial aid application opened up. And so in the next few months, the colleges will have deadlines for when it is that they want these applications to be in for your child to get admitted into these colleges. The minimum requirements is at least 3 to 5. Again, depending on what your child wants to study. If your child wants to submit applications to 10 colleges and or universities, that's perfectly fine. These are applications that you want to sit down and talk to with your child. Again, getting that personal statement, finding out if there's letters of recommendation. I think some of that stuff, talk to with their counselor or with one of their teachers if they're going to ask their teacher for a letter of recommendation, or anybody outside in the community if they've done any volunteer work. Making sure that they get their transcripts and things in order. If there's a fee that's associated with it with high school. If there's a fee that's associated with the application for college, maybe talking to their counselor at the school, the high school, to waive that application, or somebody in the enrollment or admissions office at that college to waive that application fee would be one of the things to kind of reach out to and start planning. If there's any tests that you need to take or that the student needs to take to get into whatever college for placements or anything like that, are things to be mindful of. Any interviews that you need to plan ahead for, that questions that your child may want to ask of the college or university as they go to interviews, so that they're prepared and not the only one being asked. The interview, just like any job interview, should be something where both parties come to the table prepared to ask questions and get to know each other. So your students should have questions that they may want to have prepared for that interview for that college or university, because it's their interest. They want to know more than what they've been able to collect online or from a college visit in these interviews, maybe something more personal or something, that they want to know that they haven't figured out from the website or from walking on campus with a college tour or something like that. One of the things that helped my daughter attend or decide on what school to attend was she spent a night at the school we went, and she was able to do a walkthrough. She was able to sit through a class, and she was able to stay on campus and stay in a dorm with one of the senior students that was there that offered the tour as a shadow. And because they had been in communication, and so she ended up staying, and she took the train back from there. So she was able to take the bus from the university to the train station in I think it was a 3, because of the stops that the train had to, the bus had to do. I think it was like a 2 to 3 hour drive, and then by the time she got onto the train to get into Union Station here in Chicago, it ended up being like an 8-hour trip. And again, these are things so that she could be mindful of, if I can't go and drive 4 hours to pick you up, how are you going to get back? Are you comfortable getting back? But this is something that I kind of worked out with my daughter. And so these are things that you want to be mindful of as your child starts to then, if they've completed the financial aid application already, start to think of what colleges and universities that they may be interested in attending, and starting that process. If they haven't already drafted a personal statement or started this application process, they should start doing it and making appointments with their counselor, or talking to whatever teacher they may want to or be interested in receiving that letter of recommendation or reference. Anything you want to add, Claudia?
One thing that I want to emphasize here is that it is recommended that the student apply at least 3 to 5 colleges. And the reason is because each institution has different cost of education. Classes are different cost. And it is always useful to have more than one option, just so you, together with your child, sit down and compare what are the offers that each institution has to offer to your student. The money that you as a parent, as a family, are going to contribute towards your education is going to be the same regardless of what college or university your child chooses to go to, but the financial aid that is going to be offered through the institution is going to be different. So that's why we emphasize that it is important for the student to at least 3 to 5 colleges when it's time to apply.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So again, as you're finding the fit for your child, as we said, if you can visit the school, if you can do a virtual tour, sit in the class, talk with other students and professors, maybe in clubs or things that they may be interested in, so that your child can ask specific questions about life on campus or in the college. Research the reputation, find out if there's any job placements or anything like that. Work studies, one of the things that your student can do when they're if they're living on campus or they're on campus, if they're commuting to a college, this is an option for them. If they completed the financial application and indicated that they're interested in work study, then that's something that they can present to and talk to a student that's already maybe doing that on campus. Usually students that do these tours, like the one that's standing on this bench in this picture, maybe doing work study class through or some kind of leadership training that is offered as a work study for some of these students. And so these are people that your student can ask, how did they get to this position? Are they part of work study? How do they access work study? Where are the different offices that they can contact for some of that? You could also, aside from researching the reputation of the school, the graduation rate. If 1,000 students entered as freshmen or 1,500 students offered or started, how many are actually finishing? If only 100 students are graduating per class, those are odd numbers that you want to kind of compare and find out why there's very few. Is it because they're broken up into different graduations? It at the number and figure out why, you know, the numbers aren't correlating. You should have higher graduation rates for the different schools, depending on the size of the school. You want to obviously sit down with the financial aid office and have your child talk about the financial aid packet. Some of the schools may offer specific, as I mentioned, specific scholarships based on grades or merits or sports that your child may be interested in participating in. So there's a number of different things that you may want to sit down and figure out what that financial aid packet and what your portion and how that pairs up with the personality and interests of your child. Choosing a school because they offer the most financial aid packet, but is not a good match for your students is something to, you know, to be mindful of, because that may impede your child's success in completing their studies because they may be completely comfortable or a part of the community life at the community college or for your institution. So, you know, funds is not the only thing to kind of gravitate towards when you want to decide what college or university is a good fit for your child. We had a mother who chose whose son chose that an institution, a four-year institution, based on financial assistance, and now the student feels very isolated and out of place. And so it does little help if you don't take into account the personality that your child has and what they're interested in studying and what, you know, supports your child may need. If you know that your child may need supports like tutoring or something else, maybe a more structured schedule, then, you know, you want to sit down with your child with enough time to be able to kind of sit down and find out and map out, you know, this is where this college is located. This is where the majority of your classes are going to be. This is where some of your general education classes are going to be. This is where your dorm is. And this is how far you have to walk to places. And let's walk around the campus to figure these things out, are some of the things that you may want to do with your child. What restaurants or things are off campus? How far off campus is there? Is there a bus that runs through? Is there a fee for the bus that runs through? What's the schedule for the bus? Emergency services, as I mentioned before, are also very important. So as you and your child plan these visits and or done virtually or in person, you want to look for all these things and be mindful of them as you sit down with your child. Claudia, did I miss anything?
No, everything was covered. I just want to share that as a parent, you don't have to really wait for college visits until, you know, when your child is in high school. I recently started doing college visits everywhere I go. If I go to a different state for vacation, one of the things that I have on my list is just to stop at a community college or university that is close where I'm staying. So that way I can teach my children the idea of going to college. That is important to plant the seed of, you know, that's our expectation as a parent. We go to, it doesn't really have to be inside of the campus. We just walk around and just see the different buildings that the college or university has. And it's just nice to have a conversation, even though you are on vacation, you get the chance to spend time with your child and talk about the importance of school while you walk around.
That's a very good point. And it's something that we could, you know, do at any stage. It doesn't have to be once, as you said, once our kids are in high school. That's something that we could start to do when they're younger. Next slide, please. So one of the things that if your child ends up staying in the dormitories at a college or four-year institution, there's costs associated with it that may be in addition to. Things to keep in mind is the lunch or the food menu. Your student may be able to swipe however many times they can eat in the cafeteria. So it could be indefinite, it could be 3 meals, 2 meals, 1, and then you have to make sure that you provide your child with enough snacks for them to have access to something to eat once the cafeteria closes. Or gift cards. I used to send my daughter gift cards to the local restaurants that were near there. Some of them I was able to download the app and just dump money into them so that she could use it and have access to buying lunch, especially if the cafeteria was closed. I would use Amazon to send her snacks that she wanted, send her cases of water, toilet paper, paper towels, and other toiletries that she needed, because these are things that are not included in the cost of attending. Just like transportation, getting your child to and from the school to come back home for spring break or winter break or for whatever breaks there are, just because they miss being at home. But there may be costs associated with reserving the dormitory as they get started. There may be costs associated with that. So when your child and you decide which dorms to kind of stay in, there may be some dorms where they share a room with 3 other people. There may be dorms where there is a common area for studying. There may be a bathroom that just these 4 people share. Some dormitories have one bathroom that a whole floor shares. If there's a dorm for just one person, the cost of that dorm is going to be a lot more than it would be if 3 people or 4 people share the dorm. But finding out if there's a deposit that needs to be made when you decide what college or university your child's going to attend and whether or not they're going to stay in the dorm, are things to keep in mind as you start to decide. These are different images of different dorm rooms. And again, the way that your child wants to decorate their space or their designated area is going to vary depending on the size of the room. If they have their own bathroom, they may want their own bathroom decorations, their own towels and other toiletries associated with it. They may want a cork board or a calendar for their desk area where they're going to be, studying and working on their homework. They may want, obviously they're going to need sheets and comforters, their pillows. My daughter also wanted a foam mattress or form to go over the mattress that she had, and other decorative pillows, other costs, again, that I didn't factor into some of the things that she needed. The electrical stuff that I thought she would need was the laptop, but then other decorative things that they want, their own television so they could connect to the cable that the school offers, which you may have to pay for. And things like that are all extra things that you want to be mindful of as a parent, so that you start assessing, how do you have access to what are the emergency doors? Those are the things that I was kind of walking through and seeing. There are some dorm rooms have the laundry room in the basement. How well is it? What hours do they have to operate? Or is it 24 hours, so that your child can wash their clothes, or are they going to come back home every so often to wash clothes at your place? Do you need to send them detergent, Downy sheets, or anything like that for them to make sure that they have access to cleaning their stuff? Any other cleaning supplies, brooms, mops, and things like that to clean the dormitories? These are a number of different expenses that are, you don't often think of, or when you do think of them, it's kind of last minute as a parent. I know that I did. I commuted back and forth when I went to college, and it took me a minute to complete my undergrad, but I always worked. I never stayed in the dorm room, so I never thought of these things until my daughter went off to college. And then I realized that only between July and sometimes September was where I could find the twin extra large sheets that went in their beds. And during the school year that I was trying to find additional sheets, it was hard for me to find them. So these are kind of things to be mindful of as a parent when you're thinking of factoring in, what's a good fit for my child. I mean, whether or not your child gets along with other people, are they people that want to be by themselves so they get recharged by themselves? Are they more of an introvert or an extrovert? Because they don't always get along. When my daughter had 3 other roommates, They connected them via text and they all started to talk, but once they were in the room, the way that they managed conflict varied. And so they got into arguments a few times and they didn't, there was sometimes that she didn't want to be in her dorm room because the one roommate that she didn't get along with was there. So these are all things, and as adults, you want to transition your child into figuring out how to find their communication style and managing conflict without getting into a physical alteration or getting kicked out or drastically deciding they don't want to go back to college life because they don't like the classroom, because the class structure is different, because they don't get along with the professor, and on top of that they can't get along with the roommates. So these are all kind of things to factor in. Claudia, do you have anything else? You were muted, but I saw you nod.
No, we can move on.
Next slide, please. And then one of the other things is, this is kind of a checklist of things that you may want to keep in mind as you start to check off or complete some of the tasks for your students. Like, did you apply for admissions to college? Did you meet the deadlines? When was that done? Did you complete the application for financial aid? When was that done? Is there any follow-up that needs to be done? Any acceptance letter enrollments or any enrollment deposits that need to be completed? By when do they need to be completed and how much? You could, jot all those things down on a notepad and keep it on the fridge or on a wall on a corkboard, whatever works for your family, so that you know that these things need to get done because everything has a different deadline. The housing application, if your student is going to stay in the dorm, what fees need to be paid by when? Do you need to get on a payment plan? How often is the payment plan? Is it quarterly? Is it monthly? Is it bi-weekly? When does stuff need to get paid and what final amount needs to get paid? Any placement tests, if the college or university wants to do a placement test for your students to see where they're going to place them for college math and English, things like that. Are they going to need remedial classes? And these are all things that you need to set up so that they are in when they need to be and have stuff set in place, so that by the time the fall comes, July, August, when they go to start their freshman year, all of these things are done during that time. Any registration or any advising classes they need to be, that they need to take. I know when my daughter first started, she had to take a college safety class, and so the police, the local police presented along with the college police, so that they knew that they were in communication. They talked about drugs and things that they shouldn't be doing, especially if they were under 21, and what the procedure was for getting arrested and things like that. So they were aware of that situation. But these are all things that you want to sit down and talk to your child about in advance, but making sure that now that they're in their senior year, that they have these things in place, that you're mindful of the time frame to get it done, so it's not too overwhelming to get done. Claudia, do you have anything you want to add?
No, we're good. I think this is our last slide, if I'm not mistaken. So our information is going to be on the next slide, and I'm also putting in the chat, it's a number where you can text us. That's the one I mentioned at the beginning. If you have any questions regarding college planning or financial aid, this is a good way to support your children, and you can text us there. It's 773-823-0570. Again, this is a platform for text messaging, and it's only Olivia and myself who take care of that line. And thank you so much for staying with us.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, Olivia and Claudia, thank you so much for all of that information. I know it's a lot for everyone to take in. Does anyone have any questions before we end today's session? We can maybe take a minute or two just to be courteous of everyone's time. I know we went over a little bit, but does anyone have any questions? Okay, well, I think not for today, but like Claudia and Olivia mentioned, their information is on the screen. If you would like to take a moment to take a quick screenshot of it, so you have that information in case any questions come to mind, you're able to reach out. I really appreciate you both coming in and giving this information to our parents. I know with everything going on, some parents may feel a little disconnected, but it's always nice to have these resources to be able to reach out and ask any questions or comments that they may have in regards to this process. So thank you both once again for being here with us. Thank you to the people who joined us today and the people who will be watching on our YouTube channel. I really appreciate you all, and I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.